Morning light filtered through the lace curtains as Ethan prepared breakfast for his unexpected house guests. The kitchen, once a place of solitary routine, now bustled with youthful energy as Michael helped set the table while Thomas chased Jamie around the island. "Careful there," Ethan cautioned, flipping pancakes shaped like apples. "Martha won't be here until 9, so let's not break anything before she arrives." 3 days had passed since the boys appeared in his orchard. Social services had extended their stay while investigating their background, but Ethan had shared his suspicions with Patricia Foster. The DNA tests would take time, but in his heart, he already knew. "More syrup please," Jamie requested, his small face serious as he contemplated his breakfast. Ethan obliged, watching how the youngest boy meticulously poured a perfect spiral. These children had been raised with care, that much was evident in their manners and the way they looked after one another. Rebecca, despite everything, had been a good mother. The thought of his daughter twisted something in his chest. 8 years of silence stretched between them like a chasm. His last words to her had been harsh, unforgiving. Now these 3 boys had appeared like messages in bottles, washing up on the shore of his solitude. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "That'll be Nora Parker," he told the boys. "The teacher I mentioned." Patricia had suggested someone qualified to assess the children's educational level while they remained in temporary custody. Nora taught at the local elementary school and had offered to help during her weekend off. Ethan opened the door to find a woman in her early 40s with warm brown eyes and a riot of auburn curls barely contained in a loose bun. She wore jeans, hiking boots, and a flannel shirt that suggested practicality over fashion. "Mr. Bennett," she said, extending her hand. "I hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," he replied, noting the comfortable strength of her handshake. "The boys are just finishing breakfast." Nora's presence brought a different energy to the house. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor with the children, drawing them out with gentle questions and simple games that revealed their personalities and knowledge. Michael, at 6, was reading well above grade level. Thomas, 5, showed remarkable mathematical intuition, while 4-year-old Jamie displayed exceptional recall. "They've been well educated," Nora observed during a break, joining Ethan on the porch where he was sorting apples. "Whoever raised them invested time and attention." Ethan nodded, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling inside him. Pride in his grandchildren mingled with regret for the years lost with his daughter. "You seem to have adapted quickly to having children around," Nora remarked. "It's like riding a bicycle," Ethan replied. "Though I'm remembering the falls as much as the smooth paths." Nora smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Children have a way of unearthing parts of ourselves we've forgotten." As she helped him sort apples, Ethan found himself sharing stories of Rebecca's childhood, memories he'd locked away for years. Nora listened without judgment, occasionally offering insights from her years of teaching. "Children carry the seeds of reconciliation," she said when he confessed his regrets. "I've seen it countless times in my classroom." The afternoon passed in a gentle rhythm, with Nora staying longer than planned. When she finally prepared to leave, promising to return the next day, Ethan felt an unexpected reluctance to see her go. "Thank you," he said at her car. "Not just for assessing the boys, but for listening," she finished, understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes that's what we need most." After dinner, while the boys were engrossed in a picture book Nora had brought, Ethan retreated to his study. He opened the desk drawer where he kept Rebecca's letters, 3 in total, all returned unopened. His stubborn pride had cost him years with his daughter, and now perhaps with her sons as well. He was preparing to call Sheriff Wilson when headlights swept across the driveway. A taxi had pulled up, and a woman was paying the driver. Ethan's heart stopped. Even in the dim porch light, he recognized her immediately. Rebecca's hair was shorter now, her face thinner, but she moved with the same determined grace she'd inherited from her mother. He opened the door before she could knock, and for a moment, they stood frozen, 8 years of silence hanging between them. "Dad," she said finally, her voice breaking on that single syllable. Before he could respond, there was a commotion behind him as Michael spotted her through the doorway. "Mom!" he cried, racing forward with his brothers close behind. Rebecca knelt, gathering her sons into her arms with a sob that seemed torn from her very soul. Ethan watched, an outsider to their reunion, until Rebecca looked up at him over the boys' heads, her tear-streaked face a mirror of his own conflict. "I never meant for them to arrive before me," she explained later, after the children were asleep upstairs. "The plan was for us all to come together, but things complicated." They sat at the kitchen table, the space between them filled with steaming mugs of tea and years of unspoken words. "You married him, then?" Ethan asked, referring to the boyfriend he disapproved of so vehemently. Rebecca nodded. "Jason and I were together until last year. He's their father, and he loved them, but he changed. Became controlling. When I finally decided to leave, he threatened to take the boys." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "I've been planning this for months, coming home. But when Jason discovered my plans, I had to move quickly. My friend helped bring the boys here first while I covered our tracks." "Why here?" Ethan asked, the question that had burned in him since finding the children. "After what I said. Because despite everything, I never stopped believing you protect what's yours," Rebecca answered. "And they're Bennett's, through and through." Morning found them all in the orchard, the children running ahead as Ethan showed Rebecca the improvements he'd made over the years. Neither had slept much, but a fragile peace had been established, built on shared love for 3 small boys and the tentative hope of redemption. "We could build a cabin at the north end of the property," Ethan suggested hesitantly. "For you and the boys. The foundation from the old caretaker's house is still good." Rebecca studied her father's face, noting the new lines of age and the same stubborn chin she saw in her oldest son. "You'd want us to stay? Even with all the complications I'm bringing?" "Family belongs together," Ethan said simply. "I learned that lesson too late once before." The weeks that followed brought changes to Hawk Ridge Orchard. Construction began on a small house at the property's edge. Rebecca found work remotely as a graphic designer, the career she pursued after leaving. The boys started at the local school, with Nora Parker becoming a frequent visitor to the Bennett household. On a crisp October evening, with the harvest in full swing and the orchard ablaze with autumn colors, Ethan sat on his porch swing beside Nora, who had stopped by with books for the boys and stayed for dinner. "It suits you," she observed, watching Rebecca chase the children through the fallen leaves. "Being a grandfather. Being reconciled. The debt of blood." Pain woke Nikolai, throbbing and insistent but nowhere specific, neural disruptor aftereffects. He kept his eyes closed, taking stock. He was lying on something soft, his armor removed but his underclothes still in place. Bandages wrapped parts of his body, injuries he didn't remember receiving. The air smelled of antiseptic and the strange sweet rot that characterized Vesperan settlements. Carefully, he shifted one hand to his side, expecting to find his weapons gone. Instead, his fingers brushed against cool metal. A dagger. Talia's dagger. Nikolai opened his eyes. He was in a small shelter constructed from native materials, the walls glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Seated across from him was Talia, watching him with those violet eyes, her face betraying an emotion he hadn't seen from her before, fear. With deliberate slowness, Nikolai wrapped his fingers around the dagger's hilt and drew it out. The strange patterns on the blade seemed to pulse in the dim light, almost alive. "You wanted me to kill you with this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the dryness in his throat. Talia didn't respond verbally, but her eyes widened, trembling slightly at the corners. In that microscopic reaction, Nikolai saw the truth. Not guilt at being caught, but the terror of being misunderstood. "No," he answered his own question, setting the dagger down between them. "You could have done that a dozen times over the past weeks if you'd wanted to. This was insurance. Protection for me." She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Those people back there, they're after you, your own kind. Another nod. And you're running from them because you refuse to, what? Kill on command. Surprise flickered across her features, quickly replaced by a guarded assessment. She reached slowly for her data tablet. How did you know? I've seen it before, Nikolai said simply. Different worlds, different species. Same story. Someone trained as a weapon decides they don't want to be one anymore. The powers that be don't appreciate the investment loss. Talia's fingers hovered over the data tablet for a long moment before she typed again. I was elite hunter. Chosen from birth. Trained to track, capture, kill. Never failed a hunt until I did. Deliberately. They carved the blood mark into my flesh. Marked me. I ran. Nikolai considered this. And the corporation? How did you end up as my interpreter? Sanctuary contract. I translate. They hide me until retrieval team found me. Happened before, will happen again. Unless what? Unless I remove the blood mark. Cannot do alone. Ritualistic. Needed help. Needed someone who could fight but wouldn't kill needlessly. Watched you. Chose you. You've been evaluating me, Nikolai realized, a mixture of professional respect and irritation coloring his voice. All these weeks, you were determining if I was suitable for what? Some kind of ritual combat? Talia's eyes lowered, the closest thing to contrition he'd seen from her. Not just combat. Sanctuary. The one who removes blood mark must offer sanctuary. Ancient law. Even hunters respect it. And if I say no? Her face remained impassive, but something vulnerable flashed in her eyes before she typed her response. Then I keep running. You go free. I never meant to trap you in this. Nikolai leaned back, wincing at the pain that shot through his ribs. Where are we now? Safe house. Temporary. They will find us by nightfall. And your plan? Northern mountains. Ancient temple. Sacred ground. Only place blood mark can be removed. 3 days' journey. Nikolai considered his options. His mission was a sham, he'd suspected as much from the beginning. Corporate mercenary work always carried the risk of being expendable. But this was something else entirely. Personal. Cultural. Dangerous in ways he wasn't sure he fully understood. These hunters, he said finally. They're good. Talia nodded gravely. The best. Trained since childhood. Enhanced reflexes. Knowledge of all terrain. Will not stop. And they want you back, not dead. That's why they used neural disruptors. Another nod. Yes. You are interference. Nothing more to them. Right. Nikolai sighed, reaching for his discarded armor. Well, if we're going to outrun the galaxy's deadliest hunters and make it to some ancient temple in the mountains, we should probably get moving. The look of surprise on Talia's face was almost worth the pain in his ribs. Don't misunderstand, he added, strapping on his armor with practiced efficiency. I'm not offering sanctuary yet. But I don't like being shot, I don't like being lied to, and I really don't like leaving jobs unfinished. So for now, let's focus on staying alive. We can figure out the rest as we go. Talia retrieved her data tablet. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Hunter, Nikolai replied, testing his weight on still unsteady legs. We've got a long way to go, and I have a feeling your friends aren't going to make it easy. They moved north through increasingly difficult terrain as the Vesperan landscape transformed from the twisted crimson forests to stark crystalline formations that jutted from the ground like frozen flames. Talia led with confidence, her knowledge of the land obvious in every choice of path. Twice they detected pursuit, and twice they employed countermeasures, once by crossing through a caustic marsh that eliminated their scent trail, and once by triggering a controlled rock slide that blocked the narrow path behind them. As they traveled, Nikolai found himself re-evaluating his silent companion. Her skills were undeniable. She moved through the alien landscape with a predator's grace, spotted danger long before his sensors detected anything, and demonstrated a tactical mind that rivaled his own. "The corporate liaison who assigned us together," Nikolai said during a brief rest on the second day, "was he in on this plan of yours?" Talia nodded, taking a sip from her water container. "And the trade negotiations we were supposedly facilitating?" She made a dismissive gesture. "Never existed," Nikolai concluded. "I'm guessing the insurgent activity reports were falsified too." Another nod. "Clever. Create a security situation that justifies bringing in an off-world specialist. Assign him to protect you under false pretenses. Evaluate him for your real purpose." He shook his head, almost impressed. "Must have taken months of planning." Talia's expression remained neutral, but something in her posture suggested discomfort. "What about the others?" Nikolai asked suddenly. There were reports of other security teams in the region. Were they real, or more fabrications? The stillness that came over Talia told him everything. They were real, he realized, cold anger seeping into his voice. But they weren't there for security. They were decoys, distractions to draw attention from us. Talia looked away, her fingers twitching slightly. "How many died?" Nikolai demanded. "How many people like me were sent into harm's way so you could evaluate me without interference?" She didn't respond, didn't reach for her data tablet. "Answer me," he snapped, grabbing her wrist. The move was a mistake. In an instant, Talia had broken his grip, twisted his arm behind his back, and forced him to his knees. Her movements were so fluid, so inhumanly fast that Nikolai barely registered the transition from standing to subjugation. But what struck him wasn't the demonstration of her abilities. It was the trembling in her hands as she immediately released him and stepped back, eyes wide with something like remorse. She fumbled for her data tablet, fingers shaking as she typed. "I was not part of that planning. Only learned about others when too late. Tried to help. Failed. Part of why I chose you. You survived longer than others. Smarter. More careful. That's supposed to make me feel better." Nikolai growled, rubbing his wrist. "That I was selected for this suicide mission because I lasted longer than the other sacrificial lambs? Not suicide mission. Real chance. I would not waste life needlessly. That is why I carry blood mark." The simple statement cut through Nikolai's anger. "Explain." Talia hesitated, then began typing, her eyes distant with memory. Sacred ground. The canyon Talia had identified was a natural bottleneck, its high crystalline walls glittering with embedded minerals that interfered with scanning technology. They reached its entrance just as the first energy bolt struck the ground behind them, sending shards of copper-colored stone flying into the air. "Go!" Nikolai shouted, spinning to return fire while Talia darted into the narrow passage. His shots bought them precious seconds as their pursuers took cover. Inside the canyon, the air grew noticeably cooler, heavy with mineral particles that glimmered in the shafts of copper light filtering from above. Talia moved with purpose, leading them deeper into the labyrinthine formations until they reached a small grotto where a pool of luminescent water cast ethereal patterns across the stone walls. "We're trapped in here," Nikolai observed, scanning for exits and finding none. Talia shook her head, pointing to the pool. "You can't be serious." She was already removing her outer clothing, leaving only a thin bodysuit that clung to her silver skin. The patterns across her body were more visible now, and among them, stark against the iridescent silver, was a series of black scars that formed complex geometric patterns across her left shoulder and down her back. The blood mark. Talia gestured impatiently toward the pool. "How deep?" Nikolai asked, reluctantly removing his armor. "Deep enough. Underground river. Exits 2 kilometers north. Hunters will not expect water route. Because it's suicidal, he muttered but followed her lead, securing his most essential gear in waterproof compartments. The water was unexpectedly warm as they slipped beneath its glowing surface. Talia led confidently, swimming with powerful strokes into a submerged tunnel that twisted through the living rock. Nikolai followed, trying to ignore the growing pressure in his lungs as the tunnel stretched on with no sign of an air pocket. Just as his vision began to darken at the edges, Talia's hand found his, pulling him upward into a small air chamber hollowed out of the rock. They surfaced with twin gasps, Nikolai sucking in precious oxygen while Talia seemed barely winded. Enhanced lung capacity too. She nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the bioluminescent glow from the water. How much further? She held up 3 fingers, then pointed forward. 3 more sections like that. A nod. Perfect. Just perfect. They continued through the underwater passages, each air pocket a brief respite before another test of endurance. By the 3rd section, Nikolai was operating purely on training and stubbornness, his limbs leaden with fatigue. When they finally emerged into open air, a small pool at the base of a waterfall deep in the northern mountain range, Nikolai dragged himself onto the mossy bank and lay there, chest heaving. "I hope that temple of yours is close," he gasped. Talia, looking frustratingly unaffected by their ordeal, retrieved her data tablet from its waterproof casing. "One more day. High in mountains. Sacred ground begins soon. Harder for hunters to track there." "Small mercies," Nikolai muttered, forcing himself to sit up. The landscape around them had changed dramatically, the crimson vegetation giving way to crystalline formations that caught the light and refracted it in dazzling patterns. The air was thinner here but also cleaner, without the metallic taint of the lowlands. As they dried their gear and prepared to continue, Nikolai found himself studying Talia's blood mark more carefully. The scarred pattern seemed to form a map or diagram of some kind, with interconnected nodes and pathways etched into her skin. "Does it hurt?" he asked quietly. Talia paused in her preparations, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the scarred tissue on her shoulder. She nodded once, a small admission. "Always, or just sometimes?" She held up 2 fingers. "Sometimes. When I resist call to hunt. When I show mercy. The blood mark demands violence. Refusal causes pain." Nikolai absorbed this. "It's not just symbolic, is it? The blood mark is something more. Something technological. Ancient technology bonded to cellular structure. Compels obedience. Elite hunters all carry it. Most embrace it. Few resist. But you did." She looked at him then. Really looked at him, with an intensity that made him understand just how inhuman she truly was. Despite her humanoid appearance, her violet eyes held centuries of cultural weight, of traditions and obligations he could barely comprehend. "Yes. I chose pain over murder. Would you not do same?" It wasn't really a question. It was a reminder of why she had chosen him. "We should move," Nikolai said, standing and shouldering his pack. "Your hunters won't be fooled by our water trick for long." By nightfall, they had climbed high enough to look back over the vast expanse of crimson landscape below. The 3 moons of Vesper cast long shadows across the crystalline terrain, creating a surreal vista of copper and silver that stretched to the horizon. "Beautiful, in its way," Nikolai commented as they made camp in a sheltered overhang. Talia nodded, her expression softening as she gazed out at her homeworld. For a moment, a profound sadness seemed to overtake her normally guarded features. "You miss it," Nikolai realized. "Despite everything, this is still home. Hunters take children young. Train in isolation. This planet, its beauty, its people, mostly unknown to me until I began running. Now I see what was taken. And after the ritual, if we succeed, where will you go? Unknown. Never had freedom before. Never imagined surviving long enough to need plan." The candid admission struck Nikolai unexpectedly. He had been thinking of Talia as a manipulator, someone who had used him for her own purposes. But in this moment, she seemed more like what she truly was, a weapon trying to disarm itself, with no instruction manual to follow. "Get some rest," he said finally. "We've got another long day tomorrow." Morning brought clear skies and, more concerningly, the distant sound of aerial transport. Nikolai spotted the craft first, sleek, predatory shapes against the copper sky, methodically scanning the mountain range. "They're not giving up," he observed as they quickly broke camp. Expected. Closer to temple, more desperate they become. Temple ground sacred. Even hunters bound by ancient laws there. So if we make it to this temple, they can't just drag you away. Not without violating oldest laws. Sanctuary ritual has priority over blood mark. But reaching temple grounds won't be easy, Nikolai finished for her. How much farther? Talia pointed to a distant peak where the crystalline formations seemed to converge into a structure too geometric to be natural. That's it. That's our destination. She nodded. That's at least a full day's climb in optimal conditions, Nikolai estimated. Which these aren't. And those aircraft will spot us the moment we leave cover. Talia's eyes narrowed as she scanned the terrain, clearly calculating options. After a moment, she indicated a deep fissure cutting through the mountainside to their left. Underground passages. Longer route, safer from air. Ancient pilgrimage path. Lead the way, Nikolai agreed. But stay alert. If they can't find us from above, they'll send ground teams. The fissure led to a series of tunnels that wound through the mountain's interior, clearly artificial in their construction. Ancient glyphs covered the walls, glowing faintly with the same bioluminescence that seemed ubiquitous on Vespera. "What do they say?" Nikolai asked, running his fingers over the strange symbols. "History. Creation myths. Laws of sanctuary. Guide for pilgrims." As they progressed deeper, the tunnels widened into chambers where elaborate murals depicted silver-skinned figures engaged in what appeared to be rituals. Some showed hunters with raised weapons. Others showed acts of mercy or protection. In one chamber, a massive circular mural dominated the ceiling, depicting a spiral pattern that matched almost exactly the blood mark scarred into Talia's flesh. "Original pattern?" Nikolai asked, studying the intricate design. "First blood mark. Original pattern from which all others derived. Symbol of balance, hunt and mercy, duty and choice." "Seems like the mercy and choice parts got lost over time," Nikolai observed dryly. Talia's expression darkened. "Yes. Original purpose corrupted. Hunters once protectors, not assassins. Maintained balance. Now serve political ends. Kill on command.